accuracy and make sure we're aware of them and that we can get better. So link details. Very easy concept, very helpful. Keep the big picture in mind while attending to smaller details. So we can't just focus on the small details. We can't just focus on the big picture. We need to look at both of them simultaneously, and the more details, the more accurate our conclusions. Obviously, if you think about a puzzle, if you only have a couple pieces plugged in, it's very difficult to know what the big picture is going to look like and make accurate guesses of where pieces go. But the more you fill in, the more and more accurate your guesses become, and the more the bigger picture is in your mind. So, it's kind of like simultaneously attending to both the big picture and the small details. Okay, another way we can be aware, others' perceptions of us. We need to seek honest and constructive feedback, and we talked about that week 1. We need people that we know are going to be truthful with us and can share with us perceptions. And sometimes it's very difficult to be objective about ourselves, when we live with ourselves every day. And so, the objectivity factor can be a little bit challenging. And, we often can see other people's lives so clearly, but it's hard to focus on ourselves and see those types of things about ourselves that sometimes we need to be aware of. And strong relationships are needed because you need willingness to share and receive feedback. Keep in mind that you don't want somebody that's just going to give you feedback and never receive the feedback. It needs to be a mutual perception check, because that's the way that you grow, and you need a strong relationship for that. And then another way that you can do that, consciously increase your awareness by attending to the input you receive. So it's actually a willful, purposeful decision that you make. I'm going to focus on input that I'm receiving. It actually allows you to process more information, and that seems counterintuitive, because you think, well, gosh, if I'm really focusing on everything that I'm, getting in from people about their perceptions of me, it's going to be so much to handle, and it's going to be really difficult, and I'm going to miss other things. The reality is it actually allows you to process more information. So the more conscious you are of really paying attention to other people's perceptions and how they're receiving you, the more that you are able to process. All right, other-oriented, here we go again. That's a huge, crucial part of this. Your ability to understand where others are coming from and see things from their perspective. And we've talked about the social decentering and the empathizing, and that's how you become other-oriented. But in the specific arena of perception, gather as much information about the circumstances that are affecting the other person as possible. And I always think back to this story, and I'm not even sure if this was a real story, true story, or if it was just a really fantastic illustration. But I heard the story once of there were people on a train or a subway or something, some kind of public transit. And there was a man, and he was trying to read. He was sitting there quietly. He had his newspaper or his book or whatever. And he's calmly sitting on the train, and he's just reading and enjoying his peace. And a father and 2 or 3 children get on board, and the father sits down and just seems completely disconnected and completely removed from the children, not really paying an ounce of attention to them. And the children get really rowdy and really obnoxious, and they're running all over the place, and they're yelling and they're laughing and they're screaming, and they're just really out of control. And the man reading is getting more and more and more frustrated that the father's not doing anything, and he's not asking his children to be polite and respectful and whatever. And so the man reading finally says to the other guy, boy, your children are really out of control, or some other type of kind of critical comment. And the man looks at him and says, oh gosh, I wasn't even really thinking about it. My wife and their mom just died today. And so I was really kind of in my own little world, and I think they're kind of just trying to take it all in, and they don't really know what to think. Their mom just died. And, of course, the man reading just is, overwhelmed by how all of the information that he missed. The perception was there that this dad just was rude and disinterested in the comfort of other people. But, sometimes we have such opportunities to gather information that affect the people that we interact with. And if we miss those opportunities, our perceptions can be so far off base. And so not only we're gathering information about the circumstances that are affecting them, but also about the other people as a whole. You know, learn about the people that we interact with. That is crucial. You know, obviously, sometimes that's not feasible, it's not practical. But if you want to become other-oriented, that has to be a consistent goal. You gather as much knowledge about the other people as possible because that gives you the most accurate perceptions. So, checking them. Why do you think it's important to check accuracy of perceptions? We've talked a lot about accuracy, but checking them, you know, if we assume that they're accurate, is that good enough? What are your thoughts? There are two ways to check accuracy. The first is indirect perception checking. And that basically is seeking additional information through passive perception to either confirm or refute your interpretations. In other words, you are gathering more information passively. So indirectly, passively, kind of synonyms there. You're trying to either confirm that, yes, I was accurate in what I thought, or, oh, maybe I wasn't, you know, I'm kind of getting contradictory information. But it's a very passive approach. It's an indirect approach. You're just doing it more through observation, or you're doing it more through the grapevine. You know, hey, I'm curious, what do you think about whatever? And then direct perception checking, it's basically asking straight out. So someone, you know, you tend to think of someone as very sarcastic, and you might say, am I accurate in saying that you tend to be a little bit sarcastic? And the very direct approach, it can be very effective, it can be very abrasive. And the indirect approach is usually not abrasive, but sometimes it's not really as accurate either. So you kind of have to balance and weigh, you know, which is the best approach. Should I do this indirectly or directly? And what might the result be depending on which one I choose? Okay, so I'd like you to check perceptions right here mentally, just for a minute. So give it a shot. Think of a nonverbal cue that someone might give to you. Any nonverbal cue. They don't say a word, but any nonverbal cue, think of that or write it down, and then check your perception of what it means to you. So if you were to witness that specific nonverbal cue, your perception of that is this. And then once you've done those two things, consider, could it mean something else? Could that nonverbal cue mean something totally different to another person? And that can be an interesting check for us. You know, we tend to operate in certain patterns, but maybe sometimes those patterns are not necessarily everyone else's. Now, what about direct or indirect checking of that? So think of that nonverbal cue. Think of your perception. How might you go about seeing if that was accurate or not? Would you do it a direct approach or an indirect approach? Okay, now, so taking this a little bit more into the philosophical realm, I suppose, is this a moral issue? Do you have a right in an intimate relationship? Now remember, intimate does not mean sexual. Intimate means deep, connected, communicative relationship. So do you have a right in an intimate relationship to expect your partner to share his or her perceptions of you? So what if those perceptions are positive or negative? And then what about sharing your perspectives about your partner? So this is something that, of course, is going to require a little bit of reflection, not necessarily in your post, but just to think about it. Do you think that you have a right to expect that? If you are in an intimate relationship with someone, is that part of the deal that they're going to tell you their perceptions of you? And to kind of take it even further, what if those perceptions are negative? Do you have a right to expect that they will share the negative perceptions of you? Of course, you know, I don't think most of us would mind hearing positive perceptions about ourselves. So maybe the positive is kind of a given that, you know, okay, I don't really care one way or the other. But what about negative? And then what about sharing your perspectives about your partner? Do you feel that you are obligated to share your perspectives or perceptions about the person that you're in that intimate relationship with? So if you feel comfortable posting about that, that's fine. It could actually be more of a theoretical thing. It doesn't have to be, yes, in my specific relationship this happened, but that's something that is certainly worth considering. And if we're talking about perceptions and checking them, how do we check perceptions of the way people view us if we don't know what they think? So just food for thought there. Okay, and going forward, that was a ton of information, I know. What does all of this have to do with our day-to-day life? So we've talked about communication, we've talked about self-esteem and self-worth, we've talked about perception. What does all of this have to do with our day-to-day, communication and interaction on a daily basis? And then what skills should we think about or develop, and what are the rewards? So remember, we've talked about this as a journey, and all of these skills and lessons and tools build upon each other. So what skills should we be thinking about for the future? And then, of course, what are the benefits? If we're learning these skills and we're really growing and we're developing our communication skills and we're learning how to be other-oriented and all those things, what are the rewards? Because, clearly we tend to be a little bit self-serving. We've talked about that a lot. So we want to make sure that there's something in it for us. What are the benefits? How are we getting our needs met, our desires met once we do these things and we implement these changes? So please make sure that you post your reflections this week. Please make sure that you include your virtual item exchange. So 2 items that you would have with you that are important to you, and then reply to another student and share, what you think their goals and interests are based on those items. And we will do chapter 4 next week. And if you have any questions, please feel free to post on the question forum. Thanks so much. See you next time.